Now the follow-up question is twofold. Number one, Saturday was revealed in the Ten Commandments, and Sunday was revealed through the practices of the church. I would think that this is a significant change. Shouldn't we expect that there be the clearer record or discussion in the Bible other than practices? Example, removal of circumcision was debated among the church and the leader. All right, so the question is, if Saturday for Sabbath was stated in the Ten Commandments, then shouldn't there be clearer record instead of just practices? Okay, so now that is the first question. Okay, then the second question following that is, it was mentioned that the change and the practice was endorsed because Jesus appeared to them on a Sunday and Paul collected donations on a Sunday. All right, so that was the practice. Now, was it possible that they gathered together much more than just on Sundays, but also on other days? Is it possible that they gathered much more than just on Sundays and other days? Example, they still gathered on Saturday for worship and taking bread, common scene for the early church as they took bread together daily, and gathered on other days when Jesus appeared or donations collected, etc. Alright, so this is the question. I hope you understand. So is it possible that it is supposed to be Saturday because, well, they just gathered on other days as well, and Sunday was another one of those days? So what do you think? How would you answer that? So say you read the Bible and you encounter situations like that about other doctrines, other areas, or particular this, your child asks you, how would you answer? Right? So don't always look for me for answer. How would you think? All right, Howard. Howard.
I think you mentioned previously that Sabbath, God created the world, right? Heaven and the earth in 6 days, and on 7 days he rested. So although it was on Sunday in the and the New Testament, right, because of when Jesus appeared, right, it's still the same principle applies regardless whether it's on Sunday, but Jesus appeared on Sunday, and the people gathered on Sunday, and offering most of that Sunday. So we have the same principles, although it's differently.
Okay, so yes, so Howard say that the principle is one of the days for worship, and the same principle in the New Testament, the Lord always appeared on Sunday, and the record was they were gathered together on Sunday, so the day has changed. But the question the person asked is, could it be still Saturday? It's just Sunday, it was another day that they gathered together. Sujin. No, Sujin don't have children. We have children, we ask this question. Fathers, usually.
They could, but I think on the days they gathered they were gathering for worship.
Right, they could, but the Sunday that was mentioned, worship kind of activities. Okay? Worship kind of activities. Alright, Colin Tay, yes.
Example of the Pharisees being unhappy with Jesus and allowing the disciples to break the food on the Lord's Day. And the Pharisees were very clear about the reason for their unhappiness, that they were breaking the Sabbath and honoring God on the Lord's Day by doing that. But that day was a Sunday.
That day was a Sunday. Well, that would have been probably the Old Testament Sabbath still. Yeah, probably the Old Testament Sabbath still. Okay, last one. Maybe, let me see, other parents. Oh, Adrian is counting money. Maybe potential, Jonathan.
I think to your question about would it be possible, that could be asked about anything where the Bible is silent. So there should be no assumption if the Bible is silent. Don't try to second guess whether this is possible or that is possible. So the Bible is not silent in terms of practice.
Mhm.
So I think that's
Okay, so the answer that Jonathan has is, like everything else, when the Bible is silent, then we can ask, can it be? We still can ask the question, can it be? The Bible was silent, whether they worshipped on Saturday, the new Christians worship on Saturday, the New Testament believers worship on Saturday. The Bible seems to be silent about that, but the Bible is not silent of the fact that they regularly gathered, and the description of activities were worship kind of activities on Sunday. So the Bible is not silent about that. Then, as with everything else, we interpret from we don't interpret from the silent, but we interpret from the stated. All right. Now, yeah. So to me, that is the key point. The key point. Now, Saturday was revealed in the Ten Commandments. Sunday was revealed through practices of the church. It's a significant change. Shouldn't we expect a more clearer record and discussion other than practices? Now, that is one thing that we always remember when we read scriptures. So, should there be more clearer records? God reveals scriptures through a few ways. All right. One is through dreams and vision. That was the past. Two is through His Son, the Lord Jesus Christ on earth. And then three is through His written word that we have now. All right. Through His written word that we have now. Now, many of the things that Christ did on earth was practices, and God revealed through Christ. And also in the written word. When we say clearer, it becomes subjective, because we must not interpret clearer means it must be a clear statement. Clearer can be made clearer by multiple mentions of something, meaning to say that is something that is established by a clear practice that God did not rebuke also. And for that part, when it's by practice, all right, by practice, then we have to ask, is that practice something that God rebuked when it's repeatedly, after it's been repeatedly mentioned? If there's none, then we would say that, in fact, that is clearer. There are more mentions of it than just one statement. Now, what do I mean? For example, circumcision. So they say, so this person asked, for example, removal of circumcision was debated among the church and church leader. Now, there is only one Bible verse, only one mention that circumcision is, physical circumcision is now the circumcision made without hands. Only one mention. People can also argue, which people do. It does not prove infant baptism. It just says circumcision made without hands, that's all. It does not prove circumcision. But when it came to the Sabbath, when it came to worshipping or gathering on the first day, there were many mentions. So the church at that time, the apostles, somehow they knew. Now there are things that sometimes God mentioned, God says, but it is not recorded, and the people just did it, and from then on it is the practice. I say again, there are some things in the Bible that they just know that God told them, and they did so. But the part where God told them is not recorded, but they just did so. And then from then we know, for the repeated records, that is the clearer record. Another example is this. Is Jesus Christ God? Hazel? Yes. Okay, maybe I'll ask Thomas. Can you find a verse that Jesus Christ said that He is God? Jesus said, I am God.
Jesus personally verbally said.
Yeah.
Well, when He said, I'm the way, the truth, and the life.
Yeah, Buddha can say that too.
This is my Son in whom I'm well pleased.
Yeah, Son, that's what He's created. God gave birth to Him.
Philippians chapter 2, verse 5 to 11. being in the form of God.
Counted not robbery,
Yes.
right?
Not robbery. To be equal with God.
Mm-hmm.
And then,
But he didn't say, I am God. Right? Now the point is this. The point is this. None of all those verses you can argue. We argue that Jesus is God because he say, I am equal with God. We are arguing from that, right? But the Mormons and all that, they can say, Jesus became God. From that verse. He became. He was created, then slowly he became equal with God. That's all. But Jesus was not the eternal God. Right? Still can argue. Right? You will not find a single verse that Jesus said, I am the living God. You will not find a single verse in the Bible. But theologians argue from many of these verses. So Thomas is correct. All those verses are verses we quote. I am the way, the truth, and the life. Only God can say that. Right? Of course, Buddha can say that. They can also argue with that. But we argue that only the living God can say, I am the way and the way to heaven, and I am the truth. All other truths are false. I am the only truth. And we argue because he made that statement, the 7 I ams. Never once did Jesus say, I am God. The 7 I ams was his way of repeatedly saying 7 times in 7 different ways that he is God. Right? So when we read scriptures, we have to know that that is another way that God reveals truth. We have to accept it. Can we argue that, well, there must be a clearer statement? We can. We can argue that circumcision must have a clearer statement to say circumcision has been replaced by Passover, by water baptism. We can argue that as well. All right? Then, now, the other thing is this. We should not argue just because there were no arguments, no much record of arguments, therefore maybe it did not change because there was no argument, right? No argument, so maybe it stayed on Saturday. Yes, understand, we can think like that. But we should not interpret scriptures as there were not much arguments and therefore maybe it did not change. Because, for example, that the Passover has been replaced by Holy Communion. There were also no arguments among the disciples. There were no long debates among the disciples. From then on, it was always recorded as breaking of bread. Breaking of bread, that is it. They saw breaking of bread as that. So it's repeated mention of breaking of bread. That's all. Right? So, can we say that, well, when Paul says, God has instituted this and given to me to give to the church for the breaking of bread, this cup is my... Maybe they practiced that, but they still kept the Passover. We could argue that as well. But the fact that there were no mention of the Passover meals anymore after Christ's ascension, it was only breaking of bread. We interpret that as the record have repeatedly shown us that it was breaking of bread. All right? Now, on this point, then, so, 1, God does reveal things by stating it many times, and sometimes in different ways, to affirm a truth. Okay? God does use that means in Scripture, so we can accept that means. We cannot say that we must reject just practices. All right? So those are clearer records. That is one. Now, what about, could they have met on Saturday and the mention of them gathering in the New Testament was just like they gathered on every other day? But could they have just continued to keep the Sabbath on a Saturday? How would you want to answer that? Maybe I ask mothers now. All right, mothers. All right. Shouldn't we ask you, Yong? maybe they kept it on Saturday, right? But yeah, just God mentioned that they met on the other day.
The fact that it has been throughout the ages, has been kept on Sunday, that means the practice was on Sunday, because it has been passed down since then that we worship on Sunday. So Yeah, that's the
Okay, Shenri, happy with the answer? No. See? That's why I ask parents, right? Why are you not happy?
Well, to say the practice wasn't wrong.
All right, so the answer was, well, you know, from church history, it has always been Sunday since then. So we accepted that it was it. Then the daughter says, well, how do we know the practice was not wrong? And they just keep passing down the wrong practice. Now, how to answer that? Maybe ask John Seung-Bing. John. You know, the question is, maybe they met on Saturday, Sabbath was kept on Saturday, just God mentioned the other days that they were meeting, that's it.
Jesus Christ isn't on Sunday.
Jesus Christ repeatedly appeared to them on Sunday.
Reason on Sunday.
And risen on Sunday.
Start the first week is Sunday and worship God.
And from the Bible, it looks like they worship God from then on Sunday. Right? So the question is still this. But they could have still kept the Sabbath on Saturday.
Not necessarily.
Yeah, not necessary. Maybe they did. Maybe they didn't. So maybe we should do Saturday and Sunday. All right. Maybe I ask another one and then I'll answer. All right, May.
Because there's no evidence at all in the New Testament that they met on Saturday and worshiped on Sunday.
There were no evidence at all that they met on Saturday as well as Sunday. Now, that is how I read it as well. Now, in the New Testament, you do not read of God mentioning that they gathered to keep the Sabbath on Saturday. So that is silent. Maybe they did, but the question is, we are arguing from silence. But there is definitely clear records that activities that they were doing were worship-related activities when Christ appeared to them on some of the occasions. Now, those are definitely evident, correct? So then we interpret from the stated evidence rather than try to assume from the unstated. Furthermore, if they were meeting on Sunday to do worship activities, and Christ repeatedly appeared to them on Sunday, and then I think there will be some records to say, you know, you guys, you're supposed to worship on Saturday. Why are you worshiping on Sunday? There was no rebuke, no mention of it at all, right? Neither, and after that, all the church gatherings that are worship-related mentioned, breaking of bread, collecting of offerings, preaching from morning to night, were first day of the week. Now, it would mean that disciples chose themselves to change worship to Sunday when it's supposed to be Saturday. I believe if that were the case, means they actually were meeting on Saturday, supposed to keep it on Saturday, but on Sunday they were also practicing worship. Then they will have by their own volition change, and I believe Christ would mention, hey, you know, you're not supposed to do this on Sunday. Are you supposed to meet? They did meet regularly and all that. Now, so the person asked, they meet regularly, could it be this is just another of the regular meetings? Yes, it's possible, but ask ourselves this question. Why they were never ever mentioned on the second day, on the third day, on the fourth day, on the fifth day? From then onwards, the mention, God always singled out the first day. Did they meet regularly? Yes, the Bible mentioned they did meet regularly. But God never singled out any of the other days meeting except the first day. The first day. The first day. The first day. So from that, we interpret from the sounder case. The sounder case is to assume that, number one, Christ did not correct them. Number two, Christ chose to appear on those days. Number three, God repeatedly want to talk about the first day. In the Old Testament, God repeatedly talk about Saturday, repeatedly the seventh day, repeatedly. But in the New Testament, God repeatedly say the first day, the first day, the first day. All right? How do we know in the Old Testament? It is it is Saturday because God keeps saying the seventh, right? Seven, right? And He says 6 days thou shalt work. 6 days thou shalt work, and on the seventh rest, right? So we know because of that. Likewise, we know in the New Testament it has changed because God also repeatedly say the first day, the first day, the first day. No mention of second, third, fourth, fifth. Now, if Sabbath was on the 6th day, or if Sabbath was on Saturday in the New Testament, there would have been some records of their Sabbath keeping on Saturday, but there were none. God chose repeatedly to mention the first day. All right, so this kind of repeated mention are indications. So it is better to interpret that than to interpret from silence. Now, what about the answer about church tradition passed down? We cannot discount that totally. All right, we cannot discount that totally. Remember the church's practices for the first New Testament church were very close to Christ's ascension and then the New Testament setup. So things that were not rebuked, things that remain, they did get passed down. That is why we believe in the Textus Receptus. The meaning of Textus Receptus means we received from the church fathers. Why do we believe in these 66 books? Not 67, 68, 90? Why that? Because of the testimony of the church. The testimony of the church. God will use the established church, which gates of hell will not prevail against, to establish some of these things. And the fact that we believe in 66 is simply because the church has always believed these were the 66. That is why we believe is this 66. How did God do it? Using the church. And you also notice that during the Reformation, now if this was an error, then it would mean that somehow during the Reformation, God would highlight it. But many things were highlighted, but not the practice of keeping Sabbath on the first day. There was no arguments in Christianity about that. It is only the recent cults, Seventh-day Adventists, the recent cults that want to go back to Saturday. The church has never accepted it. It was the practice since the apostles' time, and it just passed down. All right. So if we believe that, then we have to say that the cults, which have many wrong doctrines, erroneous doctrines, have the right practice, but the church that have the right doctrines, God did not correct it at all. God left it alone. I believe God would have made some clear indication that the church needs to change. And the last one is this. Now, in the Old Testament, they keep calling it Sabbath day, right? Sabbath. The word Sabbath does not mean Saturday, all right? The word Sabbath simply means rest. That is all, rest. Can be 7 years, can be what? Rest, that is all. In the New Testament, so rest, what is rest? Why does God call it the Sabbath day, the rest? The rest means now you rest from the work of the labors of the world, and you completely spend that day for the Lord. That is why it's called Sabbath. That is why it's called rest. All right? It's for the Lord. Spend for the Lord. Rest from the activities of the secular work of the 6 days. So God says 6 days you do that, 1 day is for the Lord. Now that is why in the New Testament they do not call it Sabbath. They call it the Lord's Day. The Lord's Day. Anyone just had a birthday? Alright, maybe you just had a birthday. Maybe just Josiah, you had your birthday when you're young. And then your parents will say, alright, Josiah, this is... Then Jemima say, I want to go to the park. Then Josiah say, I want to go to play badminton. And then your dad says, Jemima, this is Josiah's day. Because it's his birthday. It's Josiah's day. Means what? Means this is the day for Josiah. Alright? The Lord's Day. So Sabbath was the day set apart for the Lord. In the New Testament they call it the Lord's Day. This is the day that was set apart for the Lord. So just by the word itself, the believers knew this is the Lord's Day. This is a day like in the Old Testament where we kept Saturday for the Lord. Now in the New Testament, the Lord's Day become the first day, the Lord's Day. Whole day is meant for the Lord. Now, hence you read in Acts 20 verse 7, now Now, Paul, on the first day of the week, when the disciples will come together to break bread, on the first day of the week, when? When means this is what they always do. When? Break bread, Holy Communion. Paul preached, right? Paul preached. And he preached till midnight. It would seem to be a day that they really set apart, the whole day, just in these activities, the Lord's Day. Right? So from all this, we can firmly say that yes, we are practicing the right thing. Right? And we can be attested by there were no conflict in the church fathers, early church fathers as well. I'm not talking about the Roman Catholic Church, right? So with that, I think it's nothing wrong to interpret from clear statements of practice. Other doctrines, we interpret that as well. For example, Trinity. Does God, now many people say, no, Trinity is not in the Bible. It's not clearly stated in the Bible. There's no such a word. Should we reject it? No. So I think that is all I can answer. Repeated statements affirms, and repeatedly no mention, like May said, there was absolutely no mention of keeping the Lord's Day on a Saturday at all in the New Testament. Tells us quite simply. All right, now the next question is this. Next question is, now why is the King James Version of the Bible called King James Version? Why is King James Version called King James Version? Why do you think so? Okay, now before there was the King James Bible, there were different versions, all right, different versions, different translations, so there were many of them. Now, and it came a point where the churches were using different versions, all right, the Geneva Bible or other Bibles, all right. So now it came to a point where the king said, all right, King James the VI of England. Now he said, now I want to have one version which will be the authoritative version that will be used across all the churches in England. All right. Now then he started this project, commissioned in 1604, to create an English translation. All right, an English translation that all the churches will use a standard one for all the readings, for all the preaching, for all the memorizing. Now, so at 1604, and it took 7 years for them to produce it. So it was under the sponsorship of King James the VI. King James the VI. All right. So Enoch, you asked that question, right? So who? Oh, Isaac. Enoch. Hi. Right. Isaac. Right. Now Isaac asked the question. So it's because the king was King James the VI. He commissioned the project and he sponsored the project. Now thereafter, when it was completed, it was just simply come to be known as the King James Version. Now some will call it the authorized version, because his aim was to produce a version that will have the stamp and authority of the church to be used for all churches in England. All right. Okay. So they didn't call it King James the VI version, King James Version. So just that. All right. So they called it. They kind of like ended up noting that this was King James who sponsored it. Okay. Now, but the thing, I think there are more for us to consider and to learn about this. It's a good question. Now we take the Bible for granted. We take the English Bible for granted. You must know that we have a complete, authoritative, and sound translation in English for us to read ourselves. Because God moved the heart of a king to do it. Otherwise, we will have many versions still. There will still be confusion. All right? Now, I'm not saying the other versions before that, they were all no good, but they were just different translation, different statements. If you want to memorize John 3:16, maybe it's going to be a bit different. All right? So, God moved a king. We should treasure this. God intended that mankind would have an English Bible. Why? Because now God is the creator of history. God intended that at one point, and from then on, English will be the standard language, the international language of the world. Now at one time it could have been Greek, right? Where they were famous, where they were, so it's the kind of like de facto language. But God knew that one day it will be English. It will be English. Now, but then not everybody is going to be able to read Hebrew and Greek. But God would want the world to know His Word. And if the international language is English, He will give us an English Bible. Why did not it happen in China? Why did not it happen in France, in Italy, in Rome? But it happened in England. Is to produce an English Bible. We must appreciate that. Now, not only that, God would arrange history perfectly. Because He said, well, why not read Hebrews and Greek? Yeah, you can, but it's going to be standard English. Means Elisha and Phoebe is by and large going to grow up standard in school, no English. Even students in China, textbooks of science, history and all that, predominantly in English, they will know English. They will be able to read English. All right, so by and large everywhere. Everywhere. So why not Hebrew and Greek? Because most of God know that at come a point of time, English will be the even Isaac, when he was younger, will be able to read the Bible. Now, then God will arrange all things. Arrange all things. So you get this Bible because God arranged things in history. God would use, now in the during this period, all right, 1604 and all that, God did not do this at any time. God did this at a very unique time. Unique not because the world became like that, but God actually made the world be during the Renaissance period. That during the Renaissance period is when the English Bible will be given to us. Why? Why? Now we know that the world went through different phases, right? The Renaissance was one of the period. Why Renaissance? God is the creator of history. Now because at that time, God intended and God will move the heart and the world to be interested in languages. Renaissance was a period of renewing, revisiting the ancient languages, Hebrew and Greek. Revisiting all these dead languages and knowing them and studying them. It was just unusual. Now you ask, are the people interested in, now when I say Hebrew and Greek, dead language, I'm not talking about the current one. The Greek is called Koine Greek. It's that Greek during that period. Alright, during that period. Even in English, there's a period where English, many words are spelled differently, have different meanings. Alright, so the Koine Greek, the Hebrew, so you can go to a Greek today. Right, in Bethel, I understand there's a Greek person. Right, you can ask that Greek deacon, read in Greek. It's different. You can't. The constructions are different from current day Greek. All right. Likewise for Hebrew. So it's dead in the sense is engraved. It's not changeable. It's there. It's very good because when you read, you will know exactly what it meant and what God meant. Because today that statement may mean a different thing. So it's important to know those original languages in that time. God would just move men to have that desire. I always think, we enjoy chao kway teow. How did it come about? We get to enjoy it because God moved someone to think of how to fry it, what to add, and the ingredients are, now we get it. Right? We get to enjoy it. It came at a certain point. But it cannot come unless we cannot have an accurate English Bible unless the people that were going to translate it for the predominantly English-speaking world understood not only English, but understood the original Hebrew and Greek form of the biblical language unless they understood it. They can never translate it for you. Just like the Greek deacon in Bethel. I can give him the Greek text and say, please translate it to English for us today. He cannot. Does he know Greek? Yes, but he cannot. So it's that form of Greek. But the people got so interested, God would stir their hearts in order to give us this. They could understand, they studied it, they could understand it, they knew it as it is, and they were so good in 3 languages. You know, in order to translate the Bible, you need to be extremely proficient in 3 languages. Number 1, Hebrew and Greek, of course. Number 3, English, because you're going to translate it into English. Means your command of the languages in all 3 must be equally good in all 3 in order to translate it well, accurately. God wants us to have a good, accurate translation of languages that we will never be able to study fully and understand fully, except that He raised men at that time to do so for us, and now we have this accurately translated English Bible. In fact, at that point of time, there were so many things in Hebrew and Greek that there is no such a word in English for us at all. Now, if you know the history of the Bible, the world, the unbelieving world, they thank the Bible for contributing to the English language. Why? Because many of the words we use today never existed. Because during that time they need to translate the Bible, they knew the Hebrew and Greek so well. Now they can move back and forth perfectly, the grammar and everything perfectly. They can move in between so well, but the problem is this: there's no such an English word or English phrase. So they invented some of these words that today we use in the English language. That's why the English speaking world say we owe our language, a lot of our language, to the King James Bible. Now that is the power of God to ensure that we have such a Bible. We must treasure it. You must read it with much understanding that God went through all that to produce this for us. I don't even talk about the printing machine. God will ensure that He would raise Gutenberg to invent the printing machine in that part of the world, to be ready, that when this translation happened, they will print, and they will go forth to the rest of the world. You see the marvelous hand of God in all this. Does God record all this for us? Well, in history we see His marvelous working hand. So treasure it, read it, know it. When you read the King James Bible, I say this again, I say this many times, then we end. You must know how good these people were. There were, I think, 47 who were just special people. Never before, never again such human beings. They were so proficient in 3 languages. It is not like Singaporeans. I can speak English, I can speak Hokkien, I can speak Malay. It's all broken. Right? It's all rubbish kind. Now these people were precise, very precise linguistic people. And they were Christians who were strong in the Christian faith. They were not just translators, that's all. Language people. No, they were solid theologians, churchmen that the king chose. Alright? Now, so I explained to you many times. When you read, the wonderful thing about the King James Version is very close to the original language. You say, I wish I knew original, I wish I knew. Yes, you will get more. But this is extremely close. The way, you know, sometimes you read, how come they put the words the other way around and all that? Yeah, it's still English, but it's a bit different from how we would normally speak. Because they are trying even to arrange the words as how it appears in the original languages. Because in the original languages, how the words are arranged has very significant impact on what God is saying. So when I read the Hebrew Bible or the Greek Bible, I can surely tell you, God is saying this, thus saith the Lord. Because it is very clear in that language. They could see that, and sometimes that's why they change some of these words. It helps you to understand. Actually, if you pay attention, it is very close to the original language, as close as you can get. That is the gift of the living God. Now, to today's Bible, the problem is this. Many of those translators, King James told them, please, you are only allowed to use the Masoretic text that the church have always accepted. And you're only allowed to use the Textus Receptus that the church has always only accepted. The rest, not allowed to use. So King James Bible is the only one that is based on those good texts, received texts. But today, all the other versions are based on, the corrupt text. Text which King James said you are not allowed to use those. Right? So when you understand all this, versions are important in that sense. Satan will corrupt versions. But God anticipated before that and produced this best translation. This is not inspired word. Understand that. This is the best translation of the inspired Greek and Hebrew text. Treasure it, read it, obey it. Alright, so thank you, Isaac, for asking the question so that we can remember the heritage that we have of the King James Bible. Let us pray. What do we have here? Top 5 reasons why church dropouts, what church dropouts say, why they stop attending church. Now please remember 66% of, well, I take the American view, they are the most readily available results. They stop attending church at least a year after turning 18. So from